I found out my family through a simple get-together that just happened to be my sister's engagement party, and I wasn't invited. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Callie Doran, I'm 28, and I've always been the quiet, dependable daughter. My sister Lena is 2 years younger and the center of every family story. She's the one my parents brag about at every gathering. I never minded it too much, until the night I learned how far their favoritism went. It started on a Friday evening while I was eating leftovers after a long hospital shift. My phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Marcy. "What are you wearing tonight for Lena's big night?" I frowned at the screen. "Big night?" I typed back, "What are you talking about?" But she didn't reply. I checked social media. No posts, no stories, nothing. It felt strange, like everyone knew something I didn't. So I called my mom. "Hey mom, is something going on tonight?" I asked. She laughed softly, like she was brushing lint off her sleeve. "Oh, nothing big, sweetie. Just a little family dinner. You've been so busy. I didn't want to drag you out for something small." Her tone was light, casual, but I could hear voices in the background. Clinking glasses. Laughter. Music. Something didn't feel right. My chest tightened as I asked, "Is Lena there?" "Of course," Mom said. "She's always here when she can be. Anyway, I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" And before I could say another word, she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling this weird mix of confusion and hurt. My own family was having a get-together, and I hadn't even been told. I told myself it was fine. Maybe it was really small, maybe it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, something in me knew that wasn't true. Later that night, as I was scrolling online, I saw it. A tagged photo popped up in my feed. It was my sister, standing in front of a golden balloon arch, smiling like she'd won the lottery. On her left hand, catching the light, was a diamond ring. The caption read, "Congratulations, Lena and Ben." My stomach dropped. It wasn't a family dinner. It was her engagement party. My parents, aunts, uncles, even distant cousins were there. Everyone except me. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't an accident. They had planned it, lied to me, and celebrated without me. All because, as I'd later learn, my mom didn't want me to feel awkward being single. That night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I realized something important. Family can betray you quietly, with fake smiles and soft voices. It doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's just a phone call cut short, and a photo that tells you exactly where you stand. And right then, I decided I was done pretending it didn't hurt. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lena's ring flashing under the lights, my mother's voice still echoing in my head. Just a family dinner. I lay there, trying to understand why it hurt so much when deep down, I already knew the answer. I had always been the responsible one, the quiet daughter who never caused trouble, the one who could be left out because she'd understand. Growing up, my parents never said they favored Lena, but everything they did made it obvious. If I brought home good grades, my dad would nod and tell me I was doing what was expected. When Lena passed a class, even by the skin of her teeth, they took her out for dinner. At family events, my mom would beam at her and say, "Isn't she beautiful?" while patting my shoulder, adding, "And Callie's our sensible one." Sensible. That word followed me like a shadow. There were birthdays they forgot. Mine, of course, never hers. One year, I turned 16 and came downstairs to an empty kitchen. A sticky note on the fridge read, "Dinner with Dad's boss tonight. Sorry, sweetheart." They made it up to me that weekend with a leftover cupcake and a half-hearted, "We'll celebrate later." We never did. When I graduated nursing school, I scanned the crowd, hoping to see them. Only Lena showed up, arriving late and leaving early because she had a date. My mom sent a text afterward, "We're proud of you, honey. You know how busy we are." I told myself it didn't matter, but it always did. Now, staring at the photo of my sister's engagement party, the old excuses replayed in my head like a broken record. "We didn't want you to feel left out. We thought you'd be too tired. You've always been so independent." Every excuse meant the same thing. You don't matter as much as she does. The next morning, I called my mom again. My hands shook as I waited for her to pick up. When she did, her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Mom," I said quietly, "why didn't you tell me about the party?" There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Callie, we didn't want you to feel awkward, that's all. Everyone would have been asking about your love life, and you know how those things make you uncomfortable." For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Uncomfortable? I wasn't invited to my sister's engagement because I might make others uncomfortable? I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a shaky laugh. "So you lied to me to protect them from me?" I asked. "Don't be dramatic," she said softly, like she was the victim here. "We just wanted a pleasant evening." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were cold, my chest hollow. I realized this wasn't just about one party. It was about a lifetime of being invisible, of being the dependable daughter who didn't need attention, who didn't get chosen. That afternoon, I packed a small bag and sat by the window, watching the gray Oregon sky shift to dusk. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done waiting for them to see me. By the next morning, my anger had settled into something heavier, quiet, but sharp enough to move me. I didn't think about what I was doing. I just opened my laptop and searched for a place far enough away that my parents wouldn't bother to call. The Oregon coast felt right. Somewhere open, wide, where no one expected anything from me. Within minutes, I had a motel booked and my bag half-packed. I threw in jeans, a few shirts, and my old notebook, the one I used to write in before I got too busy taking care of everyone else. On the counter, I left a short note. Gone for a few days. Don't worry. It wasn't for them really. It was for me. Proof that I didn't need permission to leave. The drive started slow, but the farther I went, the easier my breathing became. Portland's gray buildings faded behind me, replaced by pine trees and fog that clung to the hillside. The rain started around noon, soft and steady, drumming on the windshield like a heartbeat. I rolled down the window and let the air rush in, cold, salty clean. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't have a plan beyond driving until something inside me felt still again. Every mile between me and my family made the knot in my chest loosen. I passed small towns, gas stations with hand-painted signs, and people who didn't know my name. It felt good to be nobody. By late afternoon, I reached a town I'd never heard of, Nurston Bay. It was small, quiet, with a few weathered cottages, a pier, and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed in 50 years. I parked outside and walked in, the smell of coffee and fried potatoes wrapping around me like warmth. Inside, a few locals sat by the window, talking softly. Behind the counter, an older woman with silver hair poured coffee with a smile that reached her eyes. "Long drive?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. She nodded as if she already understood. "You look like someone who needed to get away." I ordered pancakes and coffee. A man joined her behind the counter. Her husband, I guessed. He wore a faded flannel shirt and carried the same calm in his eyes. They didn't ask questions, just talked to me like I'd been coming there for years. When I mentioned I was just passing through, the woman leaned closer and said softly, "Sometimes family isn't blood, honey. Sometimes it's the people who make you feel seen." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I smiled, but my throat ached. I didn't know these people, yet they'd shown me more kindness in 10 minutes than my own family had in months. When I left, the sky was clearing. The ocean shimmered under the fading light, the horizon stretching wide and endless. For once, I didn't feel small. I just felt free. The next morning, the ocean mist rolled through Nurston Bay like a blanket. I woke up early, made coffee in the small motel room, and stared at my phone lying face down on the nightstand. Dozens of notifications blinked on the screen, texts, missed calls, but I didn't want to read any of them. For once, I didn't owe anyone an answer. I turned the phone off completely, dropped it in the drawer, and stepped outside. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the smell of salt and pine. The town was still half asleep. I walked toward the beach, shoes in hand, letting the sand sink between my toes. Waves rolled in steady, one after another, each one pulling a little more of my anger away. I didn't know where I was going, and it didn't matter. There was no one waiting to tell me I was doing something wrong, no one comparing me to someone else. The rhythm of the sea gave me room to think. I thought about the years I had spent chasing approval that was never going to come. The nights I stayed home when my parents needed something. The calls I answered even when I was exhausted. The way I learned to swallow disappointment so I wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Every memory hit like a quiet tide. After a while, I sat on a piece of driftwood and pulled out my notebook. The pages were mostly blank, but they didn't stay that way for long. I started writing down everything I'd never said out loud, words that had lived in my throat for years. I wrote about birthdays they forgot, conversations they cut short, the way silence had become my role in the family. The words came fast, messy, honest. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. It wasn't anger anymore, it was relief. I didn't have to wait for someone to listen. I was listening to myself, maybe for the first time. I filled 3 pages before the wind picked up, flapping the corners like it wanted to read them too. I tucked the notebook against my chest and laughed softly. The sound felt strange, almost unfamiliar, but good. I spent the rest of the day wandering through the dunes and small side streets. I bought a sandwich from a food truck, watched seagulls fight over fries, and listened to the distant hum of the tide. There was no noise from home, no questions, no guilt. Just the quiet pulse of a life that belonged only to me. By the time the sun began to set, streaks of orange and gold stretched across the water. I walked back to the motel with sand still clinging to my feet and a calm I hadn't felt in years. When I finally reached my room, the sky outside had turned dark. I opened the drawer and stared at my phone. For a second, I thought about leaving it off another night, but curiosity tugged at me. I pressed the button, and the screen lit up, bright, insistent, alive. It started buzzing before it even finished turning on. Dozens of missed calls, messages stacked on top of each other. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong. The phone wouldn't stop shaking in my hand. Screen after screen of missed calls flashed. Mom, Dad, Lena. Even numbers I didn't recognize. I blinked at it, confused. My first thought was simple. They must have realized I knew about the engagement. Maybe they were panicking because they'd been caught in their lie. I almost laughed, thinking how typical that would be, scrambling to fix their image once they realized I wasn't fooled. But the messages kept coming. I set the phone down on the bed, sat beside it, and watched it vibrate like it was alive. My name lit up again and again in message previews. Short sentences, half-finished, desperate. Call us now. Please answer. It's serious. The tone was wrong. Too sharp, too frantic. I hesitated before unlocking it. The first text that appeared was from my mother. Callie, please pick up. It's an emergency. My heart started beating faster. Then another. Something happened after the party. We need you. I scrolled through dozens more, all variations of the same thing. No details. Just panic. My stomach twisted. For a second, I wondered if someone was hurt. Maybe an accident? But that didn't make sense. Why would I be the one they needed? I opened the voicemail section. There were 6 new ones. I played the first, just static, muffled voices in the background. The second came from my dad. His voice was strained, tight in a way I'd never heard before. Callie, it's your father. Something's happened. We need you to come home right away. I froze. The room felt smaller. The steady hum of the ocean outside faded until I could only hear my heartbeat. He didn't say what happened, didn't say who it involved, just that they needed me. The next message was from my aunt, her voice trembling. Sweetheart, I don't know if you've heard yet, but please call your mom. It's bad. I didn't know what to do, call back or wait. Every instinct told me to stay still. My body felt heavy, rooted to the bed, while my mind ran in circles. Maybe it was about Lena. Maybe something had gone wrong at the party. The thought made my throat tighten. I played the final voicemail. It was my dad again, quieter this time, like the air had been knocked out of him. Something happened at the party after you left. We need you. I sat there listening to the empty click that followed, my hand shaking around the phone. After I left, the words hit strange because I hadn't been there. But that slip told me enough. They were trying to rewrite things again, shape the story before I even heard it. Still, his voice didn't sound manipulative. It sounded scared. I stood up and stared out the window. The tide was low, the beach half lit by the moon. I could still feel the peace from earlier clinging to me, but it was slipping fast. I didn't know what had happened back home, only that the storm I'd escaped had found a way to follow me. The phone rang again, Lena's name flashing across the screen. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Her voice came through uneven, shaking like she was gasping between sobs. Callie, she cried, barely getting the word out. Please don't hang up. I didn't say anything at first. The sound of her crying filled the silence. Then she spoke again, words tumbling out in pieces. Everything's ruined. It's all gone wrong. I pressed the phone closer. What happened? She took a breath, sharp and quick. Ben's ex showed up, she said, voice cracking. She came to the party. She had proof. Messages, pictures, everything. My chest tightened. I didn't interrupt. I just listened as she tried to steady herself. He proposed to her first, she whispered. A month before me. He told her he was breaking things off, but he didn't. He just moved on to me. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I heard the sound of clinking glasses, people shouting in the background of her story, like the memory was replaying through her voice. She went on, choking on each word. She stood right in the middle of the room and said his full name, said he promised her the same ring, the same date, everything. Everyone saw it. Mom tried to get her out, but people were filming, taking pictures. Dad yelled at someone to turn off the music. It was chaos. I leaned back against the wall, my hand covering my mouth. She kept talking, barely pausing for breath. Aunt Marcy told everyone to calm down, but it was too late. Half the guests left. People were whispering, saying I should have known. Mom's face went white. Dad just stood there, frozen. The image played vividly in my mind. The house decorated in gold and white. Laughter turned to whispers, champagne glasses half empty, and Lena's perfect night unraveling one sentence at a time. Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. I ran upstairs. Ben tried to explain, but everyone heard enough. It's all over now. The news spread before we even left the house. I closed my eyes, hearing her crying softly through the static. My throat felt tight, but I still didn't say anything. There was a strange stillness in me, a mix of shock, sorrow, and something darker, quieter. She kept apologizing, as if I were the one who'd been wronged most of all. You were right not to come, she said, her voice breaking. It was supposed to be perfect, but it turned into a nightmare. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered every time I'd been made to sit on the sidelines of her happiness, watching from a distance while everyone else cheered her on. "I'm sorry, Lena," I finally said, my voice calm. "I really am." And I meant it, but beneath the sympathy was something I couldn't ignore, a quiet satisfaction that, for once, the truth had chosen to speak for itself. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Her voice trembled the moment I answered. "Callie, honey, please come home," she said quickly, skipping any greeting. "We need you here. Your sister's devastated. The family's in shock. It's a complete mess." I stayed quiet for a few seconds, letting her words spill out. She went on about how people were calling, how rumors were spreading, how they couldn't handle it alone. I could almost picture her pacing through the living room, one hand clutching her phone, the other pressing against her temple. "Mom," I finally said, my tone steady. "You all didn't want me there. You can fix it yourselves." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, sharp and uneven. "Don't be like this," she pleaded. "We're still your family. Things got out of hand, but we have to pull together right now." I looked out the window at the soft gray sea, waves folding gently against the sand. My voice didn't shake when I answered. "You only call when something breaks. This time, I'm not coming to pick up the pieces." She tried again, softer now. "I made a mistake, sweetheart." "Yeah," I said. "You did." Then I ended the call. The silence afterward felt heavier than anything she'd said. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was calm, almost soothing. For years, I'd been the one who rushed in to make things better. I'd fix, forgive, move on. This time I didn't. And that felt like its own kind of revenge, quiet, clean, and without guilt. I packed my small bag and left the motel for a nearby inn that overlooked the bay. The building was old, painted pale blue, with flower boxes under every window. A woman at the front desk greeted me with a warm smile and handed me a key without asking too many questions. The simple kindness made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. After unpacking, I walked down to a seaside restaurant tucked beside the docks. The place smelled of butter and salt, the kind of comfort that doesn't ask for anything in return. I ordered grilled salmon and a glass of wine, sitting by the window where I could watch the water shimmer under the setting sun. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. I didn't feel the need to explain or apologize. Every bite of food tasted like relief. Every breath felt new. Outside, the sky turned a deep pink, and the sound of the waves carried softly through the open door. I thought about how revenge didn't always need anger or grand gestures. Sometimes it was this, a quiet evening by the sea, a meal that belonged to me, peace that no one could take away. I paid the bill, thanked the waiter, and stepped out into the cool night air. The breeze brushed against my face, gentle and clean. As I walked back toward the inn, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I'd already won by leaving. 3 days passed before I saw her car pull into the gravel lot beside the inn. It was the same silver sedan from home, dusty now from the drive. I watched through the window as she stepped out, shoulders slumped, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the ocean like she was afraid to come closer. Then she spotted me by the porch and walked over slowly, almost like she expected me to turn away. "Callie," she said, voice thin and tired. I nodded but didn't say anything. She looked different, her hair messy, makeup smudged, a shadow of the polished sister I'd seen in every family photo. She tried to smile, but it broke halfway. "Can we talk?" I motioned to a small table outside the inn. The air smelled of salt and rain, the sky heavy with gray clouds. We sat across from each other in the kind of silence that fills every space until someone dares to break it. Finally she did. "I knew," she whispered. My chest tightened. "Knew what?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, red-rimmed and wet. "That you weren't invited. Mom told me not to say anything. She said it would ruin the photos." The last words barely came out, soft and trembling. For a second, I couldn't move. My hands gripped the edge of the table. She looked at me like she expected me to yell, but I didn't. I just sat there, letting the words sink in, each one sharp and cold. "I wanted to tell you," she went on, her voice cracking. "I almost did. But she said it would start a fight, that it was better this way. I was stupid. I let her decide for me." Her face crumpled, and she covered it with her hand. I watched as her shoulders shook, small gasps breaking. The anger I thought I'd feel never came. Instead, there was just this quiet ache. "I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "You didn't deserve that. Any of it. You were always there for me, and I let them treat you like you didn't matter." I looked at her for a long time before speaking. "You could have told me. One text, one word. That's all it would have taken." She nodded, tears streaking down her face. "I know. I wanted to keep the peace, and now everything's ruined anyway." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of the sea between us. I reached for my coffee, more to steady my hands than to drink it. "You can't fix what they broke for you," I said quietly. but you can stop letting them do it again. She stared at me, eyes wide, as if those words hit harder than I meant them to. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. I didn't pull away. We sat like that, two sisters who hadn't really spoken in years, finally stripped of everything fake. No parents, no expectations, just truth sitting heavy between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something real, and that was more than we'd ever had. The next morning, the sky over Nurston Bay was pale and quiet, the tide crawling in slow and steady. Lena knocked softly on my door, her voice low. Can we walk for a bit? I nodded, pulling on a sweater. We didn't say much at first, just walked side by side along the wet sand. The wind was cool, brushing against our faces, and the sound of the waves filled the spaces between our steps. After a while she spoke. I keep thinking about how we grew up, she said. Everything was about keeping them happy. It didn't matter what we wanted, as long as Mom didn't get embarrassed and Dad didn't get upset. I looked out toward the horizon, where the water met the sky in a thin gray line. They built their whole lives around how things looked, I said quietly, and we learned to fit inside that picture. She nodded, kicking at a piece of driftwood. I thought if I did everything right, they'd finally stop comparing us. But they never did they? No, I said. They just found new ways to make us compete. We kept walking. The sand shifted under our feet, soft and uneven, like it was reminding us how easy it was to lose balance if we didn't watch where we stepped. I ended it with Ben, she said suddenly. Her voice was steady this time, not shaky like before. I told him I couldn't do it. Not after everything. I glanced at her, surprised. You sure? Yeah, she said, not. For once, I didn't care what Mom thought. She told me I was making a mistake, that we could fix it if I just forgave him. But I realized she wasn't trying to fix me. She was trying to fix her reputation. There was a long pause after that. The kind that isn't uncomfortable, just full of understanding. I let out a slow breath, watching it mix with the sea air. I'm not going back, I said finally. Not to being the one they forget about when it's convenient. I can love them, but I can't keep shrinking to make them comfortable. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing me for the first time instead of through me. I get it, she said softly. I think I've been doing the same thing, just in a different way. We walked farther down the beach until the pier came into view, weathered stretching into the open water. Gulls circled above us, their cries sharp and distant. The moment felt fragile but real, like something old cracking just enough to let light through. Lena stopped and turned toward me. I don't expect you to forgive me right now, she said. I just don't want to lose you for good. I met her eyes, calm but firm. You won't, I said. But it's going to be different this time. Equal. She smiled faintly, a quiet, grateful smile, and we started walking again. The tide rolled around our ankles, cool and persistent, washing over the footprints we left behind. Weeks later, the rhythm of life had settled into something quiet and steady. I was back home in Portland, though it didn't feel like the same place I'd left. The air in my apartment felt lighter now, like it finally belonged to me. Most mornings started slow, a cup of coffee by the window, soft music, and the kind of calm that used to feel impossible. My phone still lit up from time to time. Messages from my mother, mostly. Long ones filled with excuses and explanations, each written like a patch for a wound she didn't want to admit she caused. We just wanted things to be perfect. You misunderstood our intentions. I read a few, then stopped. I didn't answer. The silence between us said everything words couldn't. Dad tried calling once too. His voice on the voicemail was careful, measured. Your mom misses you. We all do. But even in his tone, I could hear it, the old weight of obligation they expected me to pick up again. I didn't. I deleted the message and turned my phone face down on the table. Lena, though, was different. She'd moved into a small apartment across the city, somewhere near the river. Every weekend, she came by with takeout and stories about learning to live alone. We didn't talk much about the past anymore. We didn't need to. There was something solid between us now, mutual understanding, quiet respect. She was trying, and that was enough. One Saturday, we drove back to the coast together. Nurston Bay looked just as it had before, gray sky, waves rolling in slow, gulls swooping low over the water. The inn stood where I'd left it, flowers blooming under the windows, the same soft hum of life moving on. Lena stopped by a cafe while I walked down toward the shore. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the tide low and gentle. I slipped my phone from my pocket, looked at the blank screen for a moment, then switched it to silent and tucked it away. The wind brushed past me, carrying the familiar smell of salt and pine. I walked until the noise of the town faded behind me. Each step felt lighter than the last. I thought about all the years I'd spent waiting for permission, to be seen, to matter, to breathe freely. No one could give that to me. I had to take it myself. The waves reached farther now, washing over the edges of my footprints before pulling back again. The horizon stretched wide and endless, the same as the day I first arrived, only now it didn't feel like an escape. It felt like home. I stood there for a long while listening to the quiet, feeling completely still. No buzzing phone, no apologies to chase, no guilt pressing down. Just peace. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is the life they never thought you could have without them. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away from my family, or should I have given them another chance? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.